Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and today I am joined by Action Network NFL expert, the one and only Chris Raybon. What up, Chris? How you doing, man?
What's going on, Evan? I'm chilling, just being a Giants fan and hating our quarterback situation right now, as I mentioned last time. But the draft is getting a little closer, so starting to get excited. We're still itching for a trade, so maybe we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah, it's honestly a little bit crazy. We haven't had a trade yet when I feel like in most recent years there's some sort of movement, but I think you and I have a bit of a reason why. We'll get into that in a little bit. But today, I feel like Final Four week, this is literally the time where the draft starts to bloom. This is kind of when I start to get excited about a lot of this stuff and kind of get into the nitty gritty. So we are literally going to start at the top of the draft, which Cam Ward, again, not much of a conversation as he's like minus 2,000 right now to go number one. I don't think I'll toss it to you before we move on to number two and probably the more interesting stuff, but really no movement there, no care in the world. He's number one, right?
Yeah, and I think he is the best quarterback in the draft, and therefore, probably the most valuable player in the draft, especially to the teams that are drafting early. But even if Tennessee ends up trading out of that pick, which we've heard kind of whispers that they're not everyone in the organization is sold, and that could just be a smoke screen to see what kind of offers they can get before draft day. But if they do end up trading out, the rumor is the Giants at one point were trying to go from 3-1, so I think that would still be to select Cam Ward. So either way, betting Cam Ward, that was something. I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks now. It's minus 2,000. I mean, I wouldn't touch it at this point. I don't think it's whatever that implied odds is. I don't think it's worth risking. For little return. But I'm pretty good bet that Cam Ward does go number one.
Yeah, I think at this point, and we had discussions about, I think the Jets, the Browns, the Giants. I just don't think it's worth it for these teams. And I think we were waiting for Shador to potentially be challenging Ward for one, but instead, and this happens in some drafts, he's now challenging Dart for two and three. And that's kind of what happens in some of these. So I think we keep moving here. Number two, and I think this is where it gets more interesting. So Abdul Carter right now is the odds-on favorite. He's about minus 250 to go number two. And then if you look at three as well, Travis Hunter odds-on at minus 150 to go number three. So I think, and we talked about this last week, finding the most value in these top three, at least in two and three, is finding another combination other than Carter and Hunter. And I think at that point, you start to look at some exactas. So overall, what are your thoughts on both of those picks? Because I think they kind of work together.
Yeah. So really, what you're going to do here is you're going to find value on every outcome, but the consensus, favorite. So Short Sanders, I think there's still value at him at number two at plus 850. I think Cleveland's still in play. The Giants obviously aren't done at quarterback if they were thinking about going up to number one. And we talked about that last week. Just because they signed these two veterans doesn't necessarily mean they're out. So I think the thing with the Giants is they probably would like a guy who's a little more mobile and who is a little better with the deep ball. Probably two of Shador's biggest weaknesses there. Very solid in a lot of other areas. So I do think that Cleveland might be a better fit depending on what happens with them. So plus 850, I think that's value. And then I still think, at plus 6,500 or 65 to 1, Jackson Dart still worth a sprinkle as well, because who knows? Maybe the Giants trade at one spot. Maybe Cleveland was serious about their love for Dart and he starts jumping up other teams' boards. Maybe they're scared the Giants take him at 3. So I think both quarterbacks are where the value is with that number 2 pick, because Carter is the favorite. And then at number 3, less value, but still some value on Sanders. He's just 2 to 1 there. Again, I can't see the Giants passing on a quarterback if they stay put at number 3, and unless Sanders is gone, and maybe they still take Dart. But either way, that would still be, if you're betting him at number 2 as well, you're getting value either way. And then Carter, at number 3. Maybe he just slides one spot. Maybe Browns take a quarterback, and then the Giants or somebody trades up with the Giants because the quarterbacks are gone. So Carter at plus 340 is a possible scenario as well.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Carter aspect. Like, do we feel like if Cleveland passes on him, that would be something the Giants would do in their situation? Because many people honestly haven't even been having that conversation. Every time we talk about the Giants, it feels like it's got to be one of the guys from Colorado. But in the sense that if Carter, actually doesn't go to Cleveland and they figure out another move, whether that's taking Shedeur, which I kind of agree with you. I think that price at number 2, and even I see some under 3.5s in the market, which, and maybe under 2.5 shows up at some point. And if it's a better price or different price than the 850, but I think you're right on the 850. Just, you're only talking about really one slot here because I think we know Ward's going 1. So I think 850 makes sense. But I think Carter at 3 has a little bit of life. Because if we feel like there's a shakeup at 2, the Giants will have to make a decision at that point. Because you assume, I don't think Cleveland's going to take Hunter. So I think it's either Shedeur at 2 or Carter at 2 would be my guess. So I think it becomes kind of interesting. And we've actually seen a lot of, you were talking about Dart over Shedeur. I see some mocks with Shedeur in the 20s to Minnesota, Denver, Pittsburgh. And the funny thing is I looked at a few of those mock drafts. In only one of those 4 mocks that I saw that have him going in those 20s, Dart's even before Shedeur. So some of these guys think that both quarterbacks are just going to fall. So I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even necessarily know if not liking Shedeur means that Dart's going to become the 3rd pick or, something like that. It's interesting because I think we're forcing Ward as the top prospect here in a draft that maybe all the quarterbacks aren't absolutely fantastic. It's kind of the read I'm getting a little bit, but that's what I think is going to be very fascinating about the lead up. And if no trades happen on draft day, I think there's going to be some movement. I just think no one's forcing it because no one really knows what to do. And they're kind of scouting players at this point.
I mean, yes and no. I personally think Ward is deserving of that number 1 pick. And I think that the Titans are probably a little higher on him than they're letting on, but they want to keep all avenues open, right? So, they're trying to, see, we already heard rumors that the Giants did try to make that move. So that tells you we've heard that Shedeur is fallen. And we've heard that the Giants want to go from 3 to 1 after signing 2 veteran quarterbacks. That has to be for Ward, right? So I think the demand is there for Ward. And then we hear the Browns, even though they need a quarterback, they're saying, most people think it's going to be Carter and not Shedeur. So I think Ward is, generating, that kind of bona fide QB1 interest. And I think he does deserve it. I think a lot of the criticisms of his game are things that are fixable or things that just come because he has talent in the first place. Like, he's throwing from weird angles sometimes and, just things that you could do when you're blessed like that. So I'm not too worried about Ward. I think Shedeur, the way he has to win in the NFL, and he might be underrated because, he's not going to be the most mobile guy and he's not going to launch it deep downfield, but we talk about the mental game, the processing, playing clutch moments, play behind poor offensive lines, under pressure, all that kind of stuff. Growing up in an NFL family, just everything else intangibly, I think Shedeur has it. So, it's just he might be more like in the Tua Tagovailoa mold. That's all. So it's not quite as sexy.
That's fair.
But and then Dart is kind of a wild card because you see the upside, but the experience is lacking. So he could be a bust. I think Shedeur is a much higher floor guy, but this is the NFL, and only people are going for ceiling. So that's why I think Dart is gaining some interest. But back to Carter really quick at number 3. I don't think it's likely that the Giants would take him, but if he's there at number 3,
well, how about this? If it's Carter or Hunter. Like, say Shedeur goes to.
I think they take Hunter because if you're looking at their depth chart, you signed Paulson Adebo for one of the cornerback spots, but Deonte Banks, I know you spent the first round pick on him, but I don't think that you can pass up a generational talent like Hunter because your receiver room outside of Neighbors isn't amazing. I mean, Slayton is solid. Wandale catches like 30 passes for 31 yards every week. So I think you can use Hunter a lot more. Remember, you got Burns. You paid a lot for him. You still got Lawrence. You got some veterans, Nunez Roches, Golston on that line. So I think where you're really going to look is corner for the Giants. But somebody may feel that they want to move up a spot for a pass rusher, maybe the Jaguars or somebody like that. Who knows? So
Sure.
I think that's how Carter will have to if he falls out of the top two. I think that's how he goes number 3. But at plus 340, I do think those odds are kind of underselling it, because remember, the trades are the thing that we haven't had any yet. They could come in a flurry, and just one could turn the entire board starting from pretty much pick 1 or pick 2 upside down. So I think still value here at plus 340 on Carter, but I doubt it would be the Giants. I think they would probably trade back.
And yeah, one trade screws really everything up at this point, especially when you're talking exactas, which I was going to say like something like Ward, Sanders, Hunter, Carter. Assuming Carter does not go in that spot and you think Travis goes, you would say the Patriots would probably end up falling on him and being like, well, we have to take the best player on the board. Those exactas aren't up yet, but it sounds like something of that nature that's a little contrarian at this point could be intriguing. Okay, so let's go to 4 and 5 now. So the odds on 4 and 5 aren't like 1, 2, and 3. There is no odds on. So at 4, you've got Hunter at about 175, plus 175. You've got the offensive lineman Membu at about plus 250. Then you've got Carter 300, Will Campbell plus 350. I think there's just more of a question when you get to 4, because with New England, it's like, what falls to you, right? Like, what is still available on the board? Like, if it is Travis Hunter, I think it's pretty easy. If it is Abdul Carter, I think it's also pretty easy. But what is your like overall thought on kind of that 4 slot with New England?
I think New England is a lot more likely to trade down than probably anyone in the top 3 or anyone else, in the top 6 or 7, I would say. So I do think New England is a threat to trade down, which again could kind of turn some things upside down. But I just want to mention, I want to point out here, because we're kind of talking about fading the consensus and there's value on all the other outcomes. Well, Hunter is the favorite for pick number 3, as you mentioned, at minus 160, and he's the favorite for pick number 4. Now he's not odds on, but he's still the favorite. So that just tells you that nobody really knows anything yet, and that there's still a lot of uncertainty, and that's why you want to bet some of these alternate non-consensus outcomes. And so number 4, still some value on Carter here. You mentioned it. I think the Giants more likely to take Hunter at 3 if they stay put, and quarterbacks not available. So Carter, that would mean Carter would drop to 4. Now New England could trade out of this pick, but either way, I think if they do, I think somebody will trade up, and it will be for Carter most likely. So 3-1, good value. And then Will Campbell plus 350. Membo and Campbell kind of neck and neck. When you look at mocks, you see them about 50-50. And if New England stays put here, very well could take an offensive line if both Hunter and Carter are gone. So I think it's more like a toss-up between those two guys. And I wouldn't be surprised if Campbell's odds came down for this number 4 pick by draft day. So Campbell at plus 350, I think, is a smart move.
And we had talked about it last week. I liked Campbell, maybe first offensive lineman, kind of moving up the board there, competing with him. So I think it kind of says exactly what you are. And looking at a few mocks, if you're comparing the two, they are kind of 50-50 at the moment. I mean, you've got Membu to the Jets in a bunch of mocks. But Campbell, I think at 4 to New England does have some momentum to it. I think 4 is way more interesting than 5. If you want to talk about Jacksonville for a quick second, because I think a lot of people are just assuming those 4 players will be gone by the time they pick, so they will be left with the best of, which at that point might be Mason Graham for them, which is plus 100 even. I mean, he's been slated to them in so many different mocks I've seen across the market. It feels like it, sometimes you get that pick, and I can't remember the exact name, but in like the last few years, it's like, okay, this guy's going 7. You see it in every mock draft, he ends up going 7. So it's just, I think you want to look at some workouts and kind of see if there's anything there to kind of glue them to Graham. But right now, it feels like he's the best available if the 4 go.
Yeah, and I think 5 is interesting because, but I think it's more interesting to just bet on what Jacksonville is going to do, because they might, again, I think they might trade up. I think they might trade back. I mean, who knows? And there's a new regime, coach, GM. I think we talked about this before. I wouldn't even be surprised if they pulled a shocker if the premium guys are gone and take a guy like Genty. I mean, I think they could go any which way. So running back is 30-1. Tight end is 9-1 for Jacksonville. So and this is first player drafted. So they could trade back, if the guys they want are gone. So and we don't know exactly, what their appetite to do that is, because again, new regime, it's hard to really gauge. So I think Jacksonville, a lot of opportunity, but I'd rather bet Jacksonville, position a first drafted player than bet what's going to happen at the 5th pick, because I think we already kind of covered our bases and got some good value with picks 1 through 4 and 5. It would just seem like we're chasing. We would have to just hedge on all these long shots that are probably going to be gone or not likely to be taken at that pick anyway. And by that time, trades that could have happened. So I just think too much uncertainty as of right now to really find value in that board. I think the value is looking at Jacksonville, because they're minus 125 to take a defensive lineman or an edge with their first selection. But, and then offensive linemen's plus 175, but, cornerback plus 750, tight end plus 900, wide receiver plus 1100, linebacker plus 1200, and running back 30-1. So Jacksonville wasn't great last year. A lot of holes, new regime, could trade back, could trade up. Who knows? A lot of value there, fading the top couple of choices for them.
I kind of wish I liked the wide receivers at the top of the draft just a little bit more. And I would say maybe it'd be interesting for them to go that direction. I do think Genty to them is an intriguing just thought process. Now we understand Bigsby, we understand what's sitting in Jacksonville at the moment, and maybe why it wouldn't make sense. But I do see right now at 50-1 Genty to get drafted to Jacksonville. I feel like it's worth a nibble.
It's absolutely worth a nibble.
Process. Yeah,
because Cohen's coming over, and granted, they got Bucky Irvin in the middle rounds, and they probably would go that route if they really felt like they needed it back. But you could always see something like they get Genty and then trade maybe ETN and Bigsby for middle round picks and try to recoup some of the value later, and just go about their draft. These are, like I said, one trade or even just one selection that goes contrary to the consensus early in this draft really turns everything upside down. So it's a great draft to bet long shots, but if you're kind of in lockstep with just the consensus kind of order, I think you want to kind of wait for some shakeups, because right now it's all those are overvalued, and really where you're finding the value is kind of zagging.
ETN wasn't even in my thought process as I was going through that, because I just assumed something was going to happen there. So like a Bigsby Genty backfield seems like a good way to kind of protect Lawrence in a sense. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the top 5.
Yeah, and one real quick, you mentioned wide receiver, and I think this draft is kind of odd in the sense that teams aren't really in the market. Not a lot of teams I see. I don't know how many you count, but I don't see many. Only a couple that would realistically be in the market for a wide receiver in round 1. Maybe it's a need, but it just doesn't strike me as the biggest need. And I don't, maybe it's kind of coinciding with the fact that the Eagles, Saquon Barkley and running backs are kind of getting a little more important. The Ravens, Derrick Henry, but it just kind of lines up. I'm also not the hugest McMillan fan. Like, I think he's fine, but he's just not a sexy, top 15-ish pick to me. I think Golden still has a good shot of tempting somebody with that speed and being that number 1 receiver taken, but there's a good chance that no receivers go in the top 15, and maybe only one goes in round one, maybe only two go in round one. So not a big demand for wide receivers. Do you kind of see that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a few teams that are threats that like make sense in their depth charts to potentially put them there, like Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I see some people plucking to New Orleans. I even see some thoughts to Miami at 13, potentially liking McMillan, and in the sense that they're going to have to replace Tyreek at some point. I mean, obviously they have Waddle, but I just think there's probably a few teams in that like 9 to 15 range that can use a good wide receiver. But I said it before. I wish I liked them more. Like I wish there
Mm-hmm.
was a wide receiver that, because I do think we've been watching the NFL, like a worthy, like someone who is going to change the game for a team that needed that position, and I just don't see it here. And I think that's why Golden is kind of pressuring McMillan for that number one slot, because I don't think that either of them are that type of amazing player. But maybe I'm wrong. McMillan has the body for it. Like we've seen him do, some crazy athletic things, and he is a big target. But I just think he's missing a little bit of those intangibles. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't love him on tape. Again, I'm not the biggest, college tape grinder. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think Golden is somewhat exciting because you don't have to be elite when you have that kind of speed, right? Like we saw it with Worthy, where he went at the end of, the first round, and he kind of started the season, a little bit slow, but down the stretch, he became one of the Chiefs' most important players, if not their most important player on offense outside of Mahomes. So I do think that speed in this day and age is something that somebody's going to covet, and that's why I have bet Golden to go over McMillan, and I do think that's kind of going to be the sentiment. I mean, you're just not really hearing a ton of buzz about McMillan, so far. He's kind of just by default that number one receiver in a lot of people's mocks, and so he is coming off the board in most mocks in the middle of the first round. A lot of people have him going to the Cowboys, but Cowboys usually take best player available, and so I don't necessarily know if they would have him graded that highly.
Yeah, I mean, I think Golden to Seattle is an interesting look at 18.
I'm
Go.
I'm not of that mindset.
No?
Like, talk to me about this, because like I see this a lot of places. Seattle to wide receiver, right?
Yep.
I still think that Seattle is a threat to either trade down or just go a different direction, because you got a defensive coach, you got you spent a lot of money on Cooper Kupp, you signed MVS. Tyler Lockett wasn't really
That's
a
fair.
big part of your offense, to where I know. And listen, JSN is a first round pick, and then you sign Cooper Kupp to essentially, elite wide receiver money, especially given his age. So I just don't know if they're going to put that many resources into wide receivers for Sam Darnold, and they paid Sam Darnold. So I mean,
Yeah.
why do you think? Because I see this a lot of places, like make the case for Seattle to go wide receiver there.
I mean, to be fair, looking at the market, wide receiver isn't the favorite on their board. Right now, it's offensive lineman at plus 115. Right now, wide receiver is about 3-1. I just see it as more of like, yeah, you got Cooper Kupp. I think we all know what Cooper Kupp's future is, which I think is a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like he is falling apart in a sense in a lot of the metrics that you and I value. I do believe that he might have a little bit of a spurt getting into a new location, but I think Darnold flourished because he had options. Like Minnesota was a good team that helped him do stuff. And this is anybody who's pro Darnold will say this, that the Jets couldn't offer him, that Carolina couldn't offer him. Like it was just a better team around him. So I think Seattle probably sees that and says, this is one of the ways we're going to get the most out of him. Now, maybe it's not a first round pick on Golden, but I do think that trying to do their part to try to help him out is to their best nature here. Like it's the way they're going to find their way to a few more wins, and the reason why they made the switch. So I just think adding another speedster in a sense, but someone who's a playmaker onto the field is good. Now, I think they have other needs, and that's the reason why wide receiver isn't the favorite. But I think it's a sexy thing, and I also kind of like the parlay of, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but like McMillan over Golden to go first, and trying to pinpoint one of those teams that might be more interested in him than McMillan, and so that was my initial thought process.
Yeah, and to be fair, I've seen a lot of mocks. I think the majority of mocks, I would say, have Seattle taking a wide receiver there. I disagree with that, but at plus 240, number one, that's interesting because it's such a popular mock for Seattle to take a wide receiver, and yet it's plus 240. So I don't know if you want to call that reverse line movement, but I mean, if you're out there doing mocks, yeah, you better gobble that plus 240 up because I mean that's still good value. I can't knock the value at plus 240. I still think when you look at Darnold, first of all, I don't think this is going to go as well. Darnold leaving Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson. Yes, he's getting JSN, but I think they kind of misvalued Kupp and now, but I do think they really need to.
I think we agree. I think we agree. I'm just trying to say what I think Seattle's trying to do, right? Like, I agree taking him away from those targets and replacing him with Cooper Kupp and JSN and whatever they're going to put together isn't going to be what Minnesota had, but I'm trying to like figure out what the vision is. So I wouldn't be shocked by that. I am a little shocked by the odds because I do see them, like you said, going wide receiver in a bunch of mocks. But again, offensive line is the favorite. They do have a bunch of needs, so maybe that is the direction they head.
And remember, like once you get to this part of once you get to the like certain teams where it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly, what they might do or what they might do if this one guy is not on the board or that one guy is not on the board or if they don't go with this one position. That just remember trades are a possibility, and those are the teams that are probably more likely to trade either up or down. So, I do think that I do think Seattle should go or should try to make a move for O-line because I mean we saw Darnold those last couple of weeks. He's going to need protection. He's got one guy that can get open. And a lot of people, I guess, want him to have a second guy, but I mean, I don't even know if like McMillan is necessarily that guy. And we'll see if what Dallas does. Maybe they do take Golden, or maybe they're surprised. Maybe Golden's gone by then. So I just think I think Seattle should not do that, but who knows? And if you're listening and you watch sports and find yourself wishing there was a way to get more into the game, you can with Underdog. There is finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house with Underdog. The game is in your hands. And to play, all you got to do is choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. We're talking touchdowns in NFL, strikeouts in baseball, points scored in basketball, and more. And they've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. You can create entries with all baseball picks. You can mix it up and match across any other sport that you want or any other combination of sports that you want. And the coolest part, you can play with as little as $1. And if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your shmoney. So you can turn $1 into 1,000 just with your sports knowledge and with Evan's sports knowledge and with my sports knowledge as well. So I really love Underdog, love the higher or lowers. And if you followed me, you also know I love playing best ball on Underdog as well. I think it's the best ball platform. So be sure to download the Underdog app and sign up now using the promo code Action Network. That's ACTIONNETWORK, Action Network, to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code Action Network and claim your special offer today. You get up to $1,000 in bonus free shmoney instantly upon your first deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 HOPENY or text HOPENY.
I mean, basically, when I go on Underdog, I just copy Raybon's lineups and hope for the best. So that is how I attack that, especially your best ball stuff. So that is my way I attack the season. But let's talk about some of these position props. And these are, to me, probably the most interesting in the markets right now. So we have, as an example, like what position will Cincinnati draft in their first pick in the draft, or their first selection, whenever that might be. And you can go on, so forth for all the teams. You actually have two teams here that I don't even have listed. But I'm going to let you start with that first one, and then I want to kind of talk about the markets with that team because it's kind of interesting. So tee it off.
Yeah, so I think the Jets are quite interesting. All this talk about all these teams at the top of the board and in the top five, and the Jets are kind of lurking here at 7. Don't know exactly what they're going to do. A lot of people have them going with one of the top offensive linemen, but remember, Justin Fields is atop their quarterback depth chart. That is right. And you got Sanders who could slide. There's rumors the Jets are enamored with Jackson Dart. You mentioned a lot of mocks have him going in the 20s as well. So I like the Jets to draft the quarterback first at 17-1 on DraftKings. I think that's worth more than a sprinkle because, again, a lot of uncertainty. Maybe those guys fall and the Jets, they're there at 7. Maybe they fall and the Jets trade up. Maybe the Jets trade back. Either way, when I look at this Jets roster, I still cannot believe that they would be comfortable going into the year with Justin Fields as the QB1, especially coming off, Aaron Rodgers, the future Hall of Famer. They are obviously trying to swing big at the quarterback position. So I don't think they're by any means done at quarterback, no matter what they say. Again, it's a lot of smoke screens, this time of year, and you got to kind of sift through them. So Jets 17-1, draft a quarterback. Love it.
Yeah, I think first of all, between a few different books right now, you're getting some very different prices on the Jets. And I've done some comparison over the last 24 hours. The Jets are very different, which is unlike some of these other teams. But I think it's probably interesting. So quarterback at 18-1 at MGM. And then you've got at FanDuel, it's 12-1. But the more interesting thing is offensive lineman is odds on -105 at FanDuel and 2-1 at MGM. So you've got definitely some different prices. So the way on April 2nd, April 3rd, whenever you're listening to this, I would probably attack it is you go 2-1 offensive lineman on MGM and you hit that 18-1 quarterback. Kind of like having those two tickets at the moment, because I think the quarterback aspect of the Jets is great. It kind of out of left field, but it all makes complete sense. And it needs a few pieces to maybe fall to them to make it worth their while. But then on the other hand, I do feel like offensive linemen, by the time they're up, is like, let me get what I need the most. And maybe at that point it's best available. But at that point, I have Justin Fields if I didn't do the quarterback thing. And I think getting him help in that sense, and not wide receiver help or running back help, but protection help, which I think will help him more than that, makes complete sense in that situation. So I think the 2-1 price is intriguing. So that is my thought on the Jets. Yeah, go.
Wait, I was going to say, so Justin Fields Madden rating 73. Now, rookie quarterbacks usually start out right around in that 67 to 70-ish range. So I definitely think the Jets are in play for a quarterback just based on Madden ratings.
I like that. Is Cam Ward going to be ahead of Justin Fields in Madden rating? That's going to be an interesting question.
I would predict maybe, I think Cam Ward probably starts maybe like a 70. I'm going to say 71.
By week
It's gotta go.
4 or 5, I say Madden rating to Cam Ward, but we'll see how that
I
goes.
mean, yeah, is Justin Fields going to be starting by week 5? Is he going to start week 1? Who knows? I mean, that's a market to watch out for. But yeah, Jets. I don't think they're comfortable with Fields atop that chart.
All right, go to your number 2 one because I don't have them listed as well.
Yeah, Chicago Bears are interesting as well, just because uh, you can have kind of different angles and takes about the draft, and depending on what board you're playing, and you also mentioned what site you're betting at, but depending on what board, you can kind of leverage it. So the Bears, there's some spots where I would kind of fade them, and fade Warren going, in the top 10. A lot of people think he's going to the Bears, but on DK, Chicago to draft a tight end with their first selection is 7-1. And I've seen a ton of mocks where if Genty is gone, and which very possible, just again with the rise of the running back again last year and just his overall talent and the trade uncertainty at the top of the draft, if Genty is gone, I think the Bears, O-line's probably off the table because you shored that up in free agency. And I think it's a little early for wide receiver. Maybe they do that, but I think tight end is really that other position that we've seen them consistently with Warren being mocked to them. So it's almost, I would say 80-90% of the mocks I've seen, it's either Genty or Warren to the Bears. And Chicago to draft the tight end first, 7-1, a lot of value there.
I think so. I'm gonna talk about another team that connects to your Chicago pick because I think the tight end position right now is a little bit intriguing, and I think the most intriguing is Indianapolis because everybody has Tyler Warren there at 14. They're like plus 120. I was trying to get the most updated there. Oh, plus 105 now to take tight end with their first pick. I was just trying to go a little contrarian in 2 ways with that slot, assuming Warren might be gone. I was waiting to see Loveland potentially going in that 14 slot. And then I was going to say, well, maybe we're just wrong all together. I mean, even though they only have Ogletree and Woods on the roster and tight end might make sense for the team. Offensive lineman, I saw it like plus 350. It's down to plus 250 in some slots. Might make sense for Indianapolis in that position, especially because tight end feels a little more volatile. Like, again, if Chicago reaches for one of them, do they grab the other? Which we'd have to wait for markets on Loveland. But the other one, Loveland to go before Warren, and I've talked about this before, but I see the highest price about plus 550 right now. I think it's a 50-50 proposition in some respects in terms of who people like, because I have seen Loveland go a little bit higher in some of the mocks. I think Warren is, understood to be the favorite, but I do think, like I thought with Campbell last week, there is some room for some tightening in the markets there. So that was my thought with Indianapolis. Any thoughts there before I keep going?
Yeah, I think I'm more bullish on Warren being the number one tight end over Love. And I just think, and maybe it kind of circles back to the fact that I just don't think there's as much of an appetite in this particular draft for pass catchers at the top of the draft. So, I still think Warren is going to be kind of viewed as the top tight end on most team, if not all teams' boards. But I will say, going back to Indianapolis, quarterback 28-1. If quarterbacks slide, I mean, Anthony Richardson, they could say whatever they want. The bottom line is he can't stay healthy, and half the time it looks like he can't throw the football. So, and then you got Daniel Jones behind him, so there's a lot of teams that have two guys on a roster, and I think that's kind of depressing their odds to draft another quarterback. The Giants signed veterans, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're locked to go Hunter and this and that. But yet, what do we hear? Oh, they're trying to trade up to number one. And so the Colts, I don't necessarily think, if let's say Warren's gone and quarterbacks are sliding, I could see some maneuvering for them, whatever it may be, whether it's up, maybe they say, hey, we wanted Warren, Loveland, we don't have him graded as high, and so we're going to trade down, and a quarterback just falls to them. Like who, there's a lot of different outcomes for this Colts team as well, because I do think I'm more bullish on Warren. I have seen a lot of mocks. Again, I've seen him to Chicago, and I think that if he goes to Chicago, and he could also go even higher than that, or he could go before Indianapolis, or they may not. I mean, tight end wasn't a big part. They kind of cobbled together their tight end by committee. Maybe they just don't want a guy like Warren necessarily. We don't exactly know. So I think there is value. I think you're on the right track. Just fading the Colts to take a tight end here, but I wouldn't rule out something like quarterback, because I wouldn't be comfortable with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones at the top of my depth chart at quarterback.
Quarterback is an interesting thought. I hadn't even thought about that just because we'd had so much conversation around those two guys. But bringing in a third body isn't crazy, especially at that price. I kind of want to get your opinion on this other team. So KC at 31, obviously Super Bowl happens, pass rush is like it was at Lost Super Bowl in 2020. You end up taking Creed Humphrey in the second round of that draft. So people kind of think that offensive lineman might be something they would be looking at. The thing is, they have 31, 63, 66, and 95. So 4 picks in the top 100. So I do think there is a chance to get that. The one thing I was looking at, which is just very Kansas City, would be wide receiver or running back, like them potentially trying to find some sort of other value in the draft as some player fell to them. And now 31 is pretty deep. So I think a lot of the really good players, like even if you like McMillan over 18 and a half, he's not probably falling to Kansas City. And then, Hampton's not going to go there. Golden's probably going to go earlier. So I was trying to find some sort of interesting KC angle. Now, wide receiver is like 45 or 50 to 1. Running back is in that 15 to 17 to 1 range. So I thought those might be some interesting, long shots. And then the actual bet would be the D line, assuming they don't go O line first and they kind of wait for those picks after. I think shoring up something like that on the defensive line at like a plus 220 range would be probably the bet I would make right now.
Yeah, this is, if you're just asking me what I think Kansas City will do, I don't like. I think running back is a little bit intriguing because, like you said, they do have some picks. Maybe I don't think they could package enough to, and I don't necessarily think they would want to package enough to jump up for to go all the way up to get a guy like Genty. Maybe, I mean, it's not out of the realm. I mean, they did take Edwards-Helaire in the first round. I know not the same player at all, but they showed that they will take running backs early in the draft. But maybe a guy like Hampton, maybe that's where they use those picks to move up just a tad, maybe 5-10 spots and snag a guy like Hampton. But I'm thinking, I don't think it's going to be wide receiver because you spent the pick on Worthy last year. You'll probably have Rice for a decent part. We'll see what happens, but you'll probably have Rice for at least some of the season. And you re-signed Hollywood Brown, you re-signed Juju, who is very solid for you. So I don't think wide receiver is a big need. You got Chelsea and great. I think pass catcher is fine now. Running back, they really did struggle, but it was really Pacheco. I think the fact that they got Hunt off the couch in like week 5 and he was very productive might dissuade them from going up for a running back. So that just leads me back to edge, and always got to get that pass rush going. Because you got Jones on the interior and Karlaftis came on, but I still think a team that has Super Bowl aspirations year in, year out, always wants to fortify the edge and O-line. I mean, come on, you signed Jalen Moore. That could be a really good signing for them, but you still don't know what you're going to get out of Sua Mateia. And you got Caliendo there, who's pretty bad last year. You can't count on him. And, you lost your guy, Tooney. So I still think that like O-line, and the Chiefs are generally a smart team. So I think one way or another, whether it's trading up, trading back, they'll probably find a way to take somebody in the trenches.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I assume trenches was the market or the position they were going to go for. Offensive lineman is odds on. So I was attempting to try to be like, okay, well, at 31, especially with the fact that they had those picks 4 in the top 100, and they might be able to fill some slots in other ways just because it's so deep in the first round, but completely get it. Yeah, I mean, I have some other teams here, but is there anyone else from a position standpoint you're interested in talking about? I have Miami. I have something on the Chargers, but I just want to, across the
Yeah,
board. Anything else?
I mean, let's go back to Miami. I think Miami is interesting because you did mention that maybe they're thinking post Tyreek Hill, and you got to maximize Tagovailoa. You can't have him just sit like a sitting duck in the pocket. So maybe that's where Golden ends up, and they're 22-1 to take a wide receiver first. Now, I'd be careful with the skill positions in general because I do think, just because we all love fantasy and whatnot, that a lot of times the skill guys, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends tend to be overvalued. But I mean, 22-1 worth a little bit of a sprinkle there for Miami. Offensive lineman is the favorite at even money, but you could see them going. You could see them going defense as well. I mean, remember the year before last when their whole entire defense got hurt. So I wouldn't rule out defense either. I don't think they're necessarily a lock to go offensive, and that's as is the case with most of these teams in these favorites here. But I mean, you got Waddle, Hill, and then your number 3 is Westbrook, Akine, and then you got the gadget guys. So maybe they feel like that's enough, and they feel like they fortified that, especially because they got Jonnu. But you could also see something like a blockbuster involving, maybe Tyreek Hill gets traded, right, or something like that. So again, these trades can really turn everything upside down. So wouldn't be shocked if Miami went somewhere a different direction besides offensive line with their first pick.
Yeah, I mean, their mocks are kind of all over the place. Last week, I saw a bunch that kind of liked Starks, the safety there. This week, it's completely different. I mean, you've got some Will Johnsons, you've got some Kenneth Grants. I get at least recently, again, we had talked about maybe one of the wide receivers to go there. But to be fair, I mean, wide receiver is 45-1 to be that pick for Miami. So that would be a long shot that you believe that they're trying to, move on from Tyreek and put something next to Waddle or something like that. Offensive lineman right now, one book plus 170 to me is probably the best price you're going to find because based off of what we watched with Miami last year, I just don't know how you don't take an offensive lineman to help protect, even if it's okay. So this is a bit of a contrarian thought, but I think Tua right now is on like basically a 1-year type deal in a sense. Like I think if 1 year goes by again where they don't get what they're looking for, I think they are going to try to potentially look for another quarterback. And I think with that being said, protecting him with an offensive lineman and getting that a plus 170 in this slot, I think is a smart move at the moment. That is my personal opinion. But you also have, again, mocks are all over the place because you've got also 8-1 for cornerback at one book, 5-1 at another. It's just the prices are really staggered when it comes to Miami. So I think it's more about what do you think they're going to do and take a stab than anything else. But I think they are super intriguing.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I think defensive line may be just as big or even a bigger
Kenneth
need.
Grant.
Yeah, than offensive. I mean, like right now, your starting depth chart is a lot of guys coming back off injury, like Chubb and Phillips and Brooks, and then you got Matt Dickerson. Siler's been great, but I think you're a little thin there. And then in the secondary as well, Jalen Ramsey getting a bit older. Your safeties are Ashton Davis and Melifonwu. I don't think you can rely on those guys. Holland moved on. So yeah, I think secondary and front seven for Miami is a big need and a possibility. And you also could just be in the situation where Miami's at a kind of weird spot in the draft where maybe it's just not a spot where they value an offensive lineman quite that high because right after that, I'm really only seeing, the guard from Alabama, Booker.
Sure.
He usually goes around, in that 13 to 18 range. But, if Miami, doesn't have a high grade on him or he's gone or whatnot. A lot of defensive players, a lot of other non-offensive linemen in those teams. So it's definitely not a short thing. It's probably it's the need. It's a need, but again, I think it's early and these lines are not super sharp. So I would plus 170. That's fine, but I think a lot of these other ones, like you said, are a lot more intriguing. Namely, safety, corner, wide receiver. If they end up doing something with Hill and defensive line edge.
I think cornerback is the one. It was 8-1 last week, down to 6-1 now. See a bunch of Will Johnsons mocked there. So to me, that would be the one I would. It's a bit of a falling knife because I do think it's going to come down a little bit, but I think it's worth a stab. That's what I've got for position. But I know you wanted to hit on some of these draft positions, right? Because these are literally just came up. At least I saw in the past week or so, which is basically Ashton Genty, all these different players. Jackson Dart have a number. Darts is 21.5, or at least it was. And it's basically, will he go over that mark or under that mark until in terms of where he will be drafted? You could just kind of start down a list here and I can have some feedback, but there is a bunch of players with some numbers. So why don't you start it off?
Yeah, I mean, we know how I feel about Dart. I would take the under on him, but not one of my favorite bets. But I kind of went down the list and just noted some that I think are somewhat interesting. Genty over 9.5 at plus 145. That means he'll go 10 or later. And you're getting plus 145. I really think it's a toss-up between Vegas at 6 and if not them, I think you're probably looking at Chicago at 10. Now, again, you could see a trade up, who knows? But if he's already falling, past Vegas, I think it might just be a signal that okay, teams are just gonna kind of stick to their guns in terms of the running back evaluation. So I think over 9.5 because I think it's about 50-50 between Vegas at 6 and in Chicago at 10. Any thoughts there?
It's a pass for me because I just feel like at this point, Vegas is so locked on that I mean, if it's not Vegas, I think it's a great bet. I just can't, I have to pass at the moment just to even look at it. Keep going.
Jalen Walker under 8.5 at minus 150. I really think he's unlikely to. Carolina's at 8. I don't think he's likely to slide past Carolina, and that's one of the reasons I talked about. Vegas potentially passing on Genty again. They may want to take a guy like Walker, so I think 6 is possible. I think even the Jets. I think teams. Anybody after that doesn't need a quarterback, and after those premium guys are off the board, a threat to take Walker. So minus 150. I really don't think he falls outside of the top 8. So not a crazy. It's a little bit of juice, but I feel pretty good about him. Talked about Shedeur already, but I would go under 3.5 at plus 140. Again, I still think Shedeur is I know there's this slide going on, and there's probably better markets to bet him. We talked about, you could bet the third pick and all that those different things. But if I'm just looking at his over under, I still think it's more like 50-50 that he or even better that he still goes in the top 3. There's a lot of still a ways out, a lot of smoke screens this time of year, and you still could have a surprise guy like Dart. Dart up, no pun intended, and Shedeur, still go in that. So I like getting that at plus money. Tet McMillan over 18.5 plus 150. I'll take that all day. I think again, there's just not a ton of teams that are really desperate for wide receiver help, and I think the reason this is priced at 18.5 is because Seattle's sitting there at 18, and he's mocked there, and they're mocked with a wide receiver in a lot of drafts. But again, I think Golden has a shot to go ahead of McMillan. And even if he doesn't, I don't think it's a guarantee that a team like Dallas, who most people have mocked for a wide receiver, I don't think it's a guarantee that they go wide receiver because they tend to go, best available. So, and, who knows? I mean, they were talking about trading Dak, and there's a lot of different things that could be going on with Dallas. So, yeah, I would take the plus 150 all day with Tet. Tyler Warren over 10.5. Chicago, now this is where I'm saying, before I said Chicago to take a tight end was 7-1. that's where you want to bet on Warren going to Chicago. But I would go over 10.5 at plus 150 because Chicago, I don't think it's a lock. Maybe Genty falls. You mentioned maybe even they would like Loveland more, or they could just go in a different direction. They could trade out of the pick. Who knows? So again, don't think there's a crazy appetite for pass catchers at the top of this draft. And, so Warren could slip and end up going to the Colts. And if you think he's going to the Colts, I mean, you could get the plus, what is it? I think it's plus something there and plus 150 for him to go over 10.5. The Colts are at 14. So like that, Campbell under 9.5 at minus 185. I think you and I both feel pretty strongly that, him and Membo are both, the top two offensive linemen. And I do think, both of those is going to be two offensive linemen to go in the top 9. So minus 185, you're paying a little bit of juice, but pretty confident about that. I mean, Campbell could go as high as 4. So
Yeah.
don't mind paying that. And then one more, Will Johnson, the corner under 11.5 at plus 130. So he's a bit of a wild card. You never know with corners, and sometimes it's surprises. But the thing I will say is the overwhelming majority of mocks do have him going to New Orleans at number 9. And so, again, it's probably 50-50 at worst. So we'll get 11.5 at plus money. I'll take the under on that all day. So those are the ones that kind of stuck out to me just going down the list. What do you think?
We agree. Yeah, we agree on a bunch here. Let's start at the top for me, and I'll go through this basically some of the ones that you did and just, kind of agree if you hit on it. But Dart is actually up to 23.5. I see it one
Down
book.
to
So
23.5.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
down, yeah, down to 23.5. So I actually like that even more. I even think 21 Pittsburgh is something intriguing for when you get specific markets. Bringing in Rodgers and someone else for after Rodgers, I think is kind of an interesting way to attack that. I agree with your Jalen Walker. I also think Michael Williams under 15.5, some Georgia defenders going early in drafts is nothing crazy. I also feel like 8 Carolina, 11 San Francisco, 12 Dallas, 15 Atlanta. Like for Williams, I think there's a lot of slots. I think the more important one is Atlanta. If he goes into Atlanta, which I've seen a bunch of mocks with him, you do hit that under 15.5. I think we agree. Yeah, so we agree on Tyler Warren. I think the over 10.5 at plus money is just a little crazy at this point because I think you would be basically asking him to go to 9 New Orleans in most situations.
Chicago, that's the
or
one.
Chicago,
Yeah,
but
that's the one I
see
keep seeing. But
I see Chicago doing other things as well, though. Like I still see a bunch of options there that take them out of that market. And Indy is just so pointed at tight end that I do feel like 10.5 is a little wrong right now. So that would be my pick with you. And we agree on Campbell and Johnson. So Will Campbell, we've talked about. I think there's probably better prices
markets,
than the
yes.
1.8. Yeah, like because I think we talked about this. Going first of the offensive linemen. Like I think there's better ways to play it, but the concept of under 9.5 I think is good. And Will Johnson, I actually really like this. Like I think at this, like I do think there is options for him to come over that mark, but I think at plus money, like but Saints, Dolphins, like I understand the Dolphins would be the over, but I think at 9 New Orleans, it does offer a lot of options for him at that slot. So I do think, listen, I think the Raiders at 6 for Genty is probably the right move, but could he even go that high? I guess potentially, but I do think at plus money, Will Johnson is a good bet now.
And I should point out though, if you really like Will Johnson to go to New Orleans, you're actually better off going. I'm looking at DK. I'm sure there's odds. There might be even longer odds, but at DK, New Orleans position of first drafted player cornerback is plus 300. So you're getting even double the odds there. If you think he's going to New Orleans specifically now, obviously, there's a lot of other ways you could do that. Couple of outs up to plus 150 with 11.5 because New Orleans is at 9. But I just thought I'd point that out. Plus 300 is some nice juice there for Johnson and what's his most mocked spot by far.
Yeah, I feel like, and it's important to mention this, each of these bets or concepts we have on each of these players, you really have to just write down what you think is going to happen and then look across the market to find the different ways to potentially play it. Um, because it just sometimes it is a little difficult to pinpoint, and you can't just look at one book, you can't just look at one market. You know, if you like Will Johnson to all of a sudden kind of rush up the board, well, you know, is it the underdraft position? Is it the position of a team? Is it specific to a team? There's different ways to probably attack it, which I honestly can't say it enough this time of year, as you definitely have to like look around at a bunch of different places to see what they're offering and kind of put some of the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say, because that's a great point, is that you don't the odds are so this is not a sharp market. I'll put it that way. And so
Yeah.
you don't even have to take these stands necessarily. You can actually account for different outcomes just based on the odds you're getting at different books, like you mentioned, and in different markets. Like, for example, I'm not sure exactly what Chicago is going to do. Is Gentry going to be there? Are they going to go tight end? Are they going to do something else? But you can go, them to take a tight end with their first pick at 7 or 8 to 1. Those are great odds. And you could also fade Warren to go later than 10. And you could do both, and you're essentially covered there, and you're getting plus money on both of those bets. So you can kind of really, kind of focus in on, the guys that you want, probably going to skew toward, the top of the board and those guys in the top 10, 15, 20 picks. But you can kind of look at those guys, and there's a bunch of different ways where you could kind of hedge based on multiple outcomes, including the two most likely outcomes, and still be getting plus money either way. So that those odds might sharpen a little bit as we get closer to the draft, but great opportunities across the market right now as we record this.
Yeah, another example, like you like McMillan over 18.5. You can also take Dallas to take a wide receiver, which is like plus 250. So there's just, there's ways to, have one bet and have one that's a little bit contrary to the other one, but at least at plus money. All right, well, that's all I've got today. We've done like an hour, and every single week we are going to be back here kind of reviewing everything that's happened in the league, talk about some of these odds, some of these different props that are coming out. And as we get closer, there's going to be a ton more options in the market. So we will be here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching. I am Evan Abrams, your host of the Action Network podcast. That is Chris Raybon, and we will see you back here next week for draft betting storylines and the whole shaboo leading up to Green Bay. See you later, guys.